Councillor Harvey Cohen. Welcome to colleagues and officers to today's meeting of Policy Review Committee, Tuesday, 4th of November. To manage the business as efficiently as possible, I will invite members to speak one at a time to ensure their contributions are properly heard. Therefore, please do not speak unless invited to do so by me. Just raise your hands and hopefully between Alex and myself we will notice you. And thank you in advance for your assistance. We know about the fire evacuation procedure, so I will move on to agenda item 1, membership. There are no changes. Agenda item 2, communications apologies. We've received again apologies for absence from Councillor Mia Hanley. I'd like to welcome for item 5 Councillor Jeremy Newmark, Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Consultation, Communications and Asset Management, together with Andrew Don, Head of Asset Management and Engineering, and a warm welcome to a new member of staff, to Bernie Ford, Corporate Communications and Engagement Manager, and welcome. And we will be very gentle with you tonight to your first meeting. Good. And then for agenda item 6, to Matthew Bunyan, Assistant Director for Finance. Welcome. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? That is none. Agenda item 4, minutes, other minutes of the 9th of September, which have been sent out to us all and on the web, approved as a correct record. Yep, that's approved. Right, great. So let's move on to our substantial business for tonight. Agenda item 5, the portfolio update, consultation, communication, asset management. Councillor Jeremy Newmark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to be back here once again. If you're all sitting comfortably, I'll begin. We're going to cover this evening the comms and consultation portfolio. Some very brief sort of comments generally on the role of leader, and then we'll move on to a more detailed presentation on the asset management portfolio. As Chair said, Kath Shepherd retired a couple of months ago now from her role as Head of Corporate Communications, and I did want to take this opportunity to place on the record our deep thanks and gratitude for the tremendous service that she gave to this authority over an extended period of time, and we wish her the best and every happiness in her retirement moving forward. Bernie's joined the team with a fantastic background, the police, comms, Home Office, central government, and we're really very lucky to have her. So welcome. And Bernie will sort of chip in particularly on any sort of specific operational issues that come up, but there shouldn't be too many because we're going to try and address things from a policy level this evening. So, I think we've got the wrong presentation here.
Yeah, we can do comms first.
Yeah, I was asked to do comms first.
Yeah, so here we go.
Brilliant. Second time lucky. Thank you. Right, so rather than try and cover everything across the vast array of comms activities that we have going on, we thought we would focus this evening on 3 areas that really speak to the sort of key comms policy imperatives right now, and those that we have focused on over the past 12 months. First is a specific update on Zen City, our AI-driven engagement and consultation platform. Secondly, the work that we've been doing on an ongoing basis to professionalise our digital output, especially in video content form. And thirdly, the work that we have done to advance our social media campaign activity. Obviously, on top of that, all of the regular work's gone on, and we've increasingly had to manage high-profile stories of national significance, including the Sky Studios Elstree expansion, planning application, inquiry, and so on. Issues like the Newbury's car park redevelopment that had gained a lot of local bandwidth. The recent work around the acquisition of the data centre site, community safety orders, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the very focused and targeted campaigns addressing our inward-facing need as an authority, such as recruitment. But let's go straight on to Zen City. And this presentation really comes at an opportune moment because we are just right now in the process of renewing our contract. As it happens, Zen City has acquired Commonplace. Members that have followed this story will remember that we effectively, when we did the procurement exercise, had quite a tough job choosing between Zen City and Commonplace as providers. Commonplace had more of a sort of planning and sort of map type focus, whereas Zen City was more of a generalist approach. We went for Zen City, but now at point of renewal, we're going to get the benefit of Commonplace as well. We made a number of adaptations to the platform with the assistance of the team at Zen City to make it more bespoke to our requirements, particularly in the areas of engagement, social listening, which is effectively monitoring and analysing social media activity in relation to our key themes, and the ability to capture community sentiment. You've got a couple of examples of some of the consultation exercises that we've run using Zen City up on the screen there. Engage is the part of the Zen City platform that is used very specifically to deal with focused surveys on particular areas where we want to test the public view. Everything from the more formal consultations to public engagement on specific issues. We have run 44 over, that is the past year, isn't it? Yeah, over the past 12 months, which is a huge increase on the level of consultation and engagement that used to happen. Got examples there of King George's and the Aycliffe Pavilion. Aycliffe Pavilion achieved actually a very large number of responses. It was 1,500 thereabouts. Yep. It's also been used for parking consultation work, which is sort of more of a sort of formal type consultation, obviously. And we've also used it in an inward-facing way with our staff. We did the pay consultation on it this year. We did the recurring staff survey and the IDS survey. In fact, we did two. We did one on IT provision generally, and then we depth charged that to look at sort of particular packages and facilities. Moving on to the recruitment campaign, as it says, it won't come as a surprise to any of you that recruitment and retention, particularly in some of the more specialist services and waste, remains a huge challenge and a problem. So we decided to sort of grasp the bull by the horns and launch a very high-profile recruitment campaign. It was closely timed to work together with the LGA's Make a Difference campaign, aimed at promoting careers in local government. I think in many ways, although there were a variety of different elements to the campaign, the video footage, the video clip that was produced was, I found it incredibly inspiring and motivational, and our staff really came across in that video. It's fantastic ambassadors for the authority, and their kind of drive, vigour and enthusiasm for their jobs really shone through, and we had all sorts of positive feedback on that. The kind of prime motivators that came out of the LGA campaign that we tapped into were the opportunities around training and work-life balance, and of course that sort of public service ethos. The LGA campaign line was make a difference, work for your local council. We echoed that in Hertsmere, and I think constantly any of you that have had the opportunity to sit in on recruitment interviews will know that when you ask the standard question, why do you want to come and work in Hertsmere, the sort of answer that always comes up, certainly more than anything else, is that idea of making a difference to the local community. So we put that front and centre in the campaign. Here are some examples of the marketing content that were associated with the campaign. Everything from stands at career events, hook-ons for sort of doors, waste bins and so on, the traditional sort of print media type leaflets, the digital stuff. We did dip our toe into the area of sort of TikTok, expanding our sort of social media reach, but also on the platforms that we've more traditionally engaged with, primarily Facebook and X, but obviously Instagram is a growing area as well. Our e-alerts, which continue to reach a very large audience indeed. What's the reach of the e-alerts at the moment? Is it?
Council, I'll need to get back to you on that.
I think it's somewhere in the region of 5,000 to 6,000, but we'll circulate the exact numbers. And we launched the dedicated careers microsite. Moving away from the specific careers campaign to sort of look at the broader reach of our social media engagement, we ran a comparison between January 24 and September 24 period in comparison to January 25 through September 25. And you'll recall from when I last presented to you that by January 24 we had very significantly increased our organic social media reach way beyond anything that the authority had achieved before. And I'm pleased to say that this data shows we've continued to build on that. We've increased our number of posts by around 24%. Number of impressions has grown 50, that is in percentage terms, but it's certainly grown to 1.2 million impressions. Is that an average per post or over that period, or is that a total?
Yeah.
So it's a total cumulative. Okay, our number of shares, that all-important number, has increased by 11% and continues to grow. I'd still like to see that increase higher, and I think it will. And people are engaging more and reacting more, albeit it's a relatively small increase of 1.3%. But I think that is a relatively decent number of reactions. That's the brief overview of those areas of the comms portfolio. Shall I pause there, or yeah?
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll wait for our committee to ask any questions in order. Councillor Green.
Oh, thank you very much. I really like the idea of seeing a real person doing a job, right, rather than come and work for local government, which might seem to be quite a boring thing, but when you see the kinds of jobs there are. So I was wondering, as part of the career events, have we gone to schools and to sort of try and encourage, I guess, young people who are still at school doing A-levels, etc., that a career in local government could be for them, as in addition to people who are at university and all the rest of it. Because if you get them nice and early and inspired, then that might be a good thing.
So your question could not have been better timed, and we did not coordinate this beforehand.
No, seriously.
We really, quite genuinely didn't. But tomorrow we have the Generation
if I'd tried, honestly.
Sorry, tomorrow we have the Generation Hertsmere event at the Doubletree Hilton in partnership with Hearts Futures. Over the course of the day, we'll have nearly 1,000 school children, secondary school children, but from, I think, I always get year groups wrong, basically 13, 14-year-olds upwards. It's a sort of, it's more than a careers fair. It's a real showcase of opportunity and inspiration in terms of what's available to them. And we don't just promote come and work for the council as a council there. We have individual teams and departments showcasing their staff. So the planning team will be there with their Lego kits. And it really is a fantastic thing to see. I'm not sure if we do outreach into schools directly at their own careers events.
I don't think we do, but we do always host work experience for people from schools. So we do that, but we don't go to the school careers fairs.
Yeah, but we put it all out on a plate for them at Generation Hertsmere, and obviously they get part of the sort of funding through Hearts Futures is coaches, and you know, they don't just turn up en masse by schools. Some of the schools do multiple visits, multiple year groups over the course of the day.
Thank you. Great question. Councillor Clarkson, then Councillor Sullivan, then Councillor Butler, and then Councillor Sussman, then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Newmark, for that, the presentation there on comms and indeed on recruitment. Just back on Zen City, and of course we've had 44 external surveys, the 9 internal. Have we got any evidence yet where we have that information and then we kind of translate that into a policy decision? I suppose what I'm saying is, does it make a difference? Because I suppose residents, they engage, be it Aycliffe, be it the King George Rec, or other examples so far where we have had that information and it's actually created a policy difference. The social media reach increase is really interesting there, but I was just wondering whether, and I know Meta do this with Instagram and Facebook, I use it myself, where we can split it into gender, age groups, also location. Very often, so in my social media, you've got people that don't live in Hertsmere looking, and it would be really interesting to see those analytics, because we could maybe look at how we can get those harder to reach groups, particularly those ones that perhaps don't engage so much on social media very often, but whose voices are still very important. And just finally on recruitment, I really like the feel of actually make a difference, come and work at your local authority. I think it's a really good premise. I would assume that retention is how we measure that success. I'd be interested to know. So obviously we'll get more people, but it's retaining them, and I just wondered if you could expand a bit more on the magic of retaining them, and is it a little bit because people are worried if you go and work in local government, particularly if local governments are going to be merged, we're looking at economies of scale, are they wondering they're going to be employed one year and then after LGR lose their job the next?
Yeah, I can certainly think of examples where the Zen City consultation process has directly impacted on policy. I mean, you mentioned Aycliffe, which is one of them. Andrew, and maybe we'll sort of cover this in a bit more detail in the asset management part of this presentation. But the 1,000+ pieces of feedback we got are now directly influencing the not just the physical shape, but actually the conceptual shape of that community centre provision on the site in a very granular and detailed way. Similarly, King George's, more recently the Aberford consultation, which came up with some very surprising, unexpected results, have directly influenced the sort of nature of our construction, if you like, of the template for the work moving forward. I think, you know, one area in which the sort of Zen City survey perhaps sort of actively changed policy thinking was one of the very early surveys we did with it on cemetery provision, where, you know, we learnt from that sort of despite a perception that the public were not particularly concerned for us to continue to provide cemetery provision as a discretionary service, that there was actually overwhelmingly quite a significant amount of support for that, and you know, it's led us to sort of go down a route of sort of actively seeking additional cemetery space provision for the long-term future. So I think those are a number of areas, and there are probably plenty of others as well. On the social media piece, yes, I think we can do all of those demographic, geographic breakdowns. Obviously, where somebody is looking at a post from doesn't necessarily tell you where they live. We live in a globalised world, people travel, and I'm sure some people in Hertsmere even look at council posts when they're on holiday, but we do have that data. Recruitment, I mean, yes, I agree, retention is the other important side of that coin. I think maybe I'd just point to one particular area in which we know our neighbouring authorities and local authorities around the country have huge retention difficulties, and that's the planning team, where we're in competition with the private sector, we're in competition with our neighbouring London authorities. Nevertheless, I think it's a mark of pride that we don't have a huge churn rate, particularly with the sort of planning officers coming up through the system. We have a number now who we've been able to retain at Hertsmere for a significant period of time, and they've grown up sort of through the system in that role. So I think that whilst retention is challenging, we have some pretty good metrics in the planning department that show we're getting it right.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got 3 small points. So if we go back to Zen City, how do you decide what a good number of responses is for each external survey? And additionally, do we know of any gaps that we can identify with maybe disengaged settlements or demographics? Because as an authority, we can only truly represent all residents if we hear their thoughts and identify their needs. So I just would like to know if we've identified any gaps that has then fed into comms. And then lastly, we had a task and finish communications group through policy review, and the report went to Cabinet in October. Have you got an update when these will be considered and actions taken, and an update to policy review? Thank you.
On Zen City and quantum of responses, look, you talk to plenty of people in the public consultation, polling, market research and engagement field, and the debate around what is a statistically significant sample has gone on forever, and I'm sure will. What we can say is that we have gone from a pre-Zen City era when it was quite usual to receive 12, 15 responses to quite significant consultations on things like the annual budget and so on, and the council used to quote those in percentage terms to try and sort of paper over the pitiful low level of responses, to it now being certainly the norm for the responses to be in the hundreds, and on increasing number of issues in the thousands. So I think we are light years ahead of where we used to be. I think they say a nationally statistically significant polling sample can be as low as 500, and I would say that we're getting pretty close to that, sort of being the norm for a large number of our surveys. Are the gaps? Look, I don't think we're any different to any other local authority in terms of our survey response figures being sort of broadly in line with underrepresentation of those groups that are underrepresented at national level. Young people, minorities, the digitally disenfranchised. We do always try and provide alternative options for them to respond, but I don't think we're aware of any sort of areas where we in Hertsmere are failing to hit a particular demographic that other local authorities are hitting particularly well. Sorry, your last question was about which task and finish group? Communications. I think that went to last cabinet meeting, so there's an 8-week timeline, so it will come back to cabinet either in November or December. I'm not sure which.
I think it was Councillor Sussman next. Nope, it was Councillor. It was Councillor.
Thank you very much. How dare you? Normally I'm first out the traps, and tonight I thought I'd hold back and let others have a go. And look, I'll be quick. There's a few here. One, Blue Sky. Do we have any intention of starting to use that as well as X? That's one. Two. I'm looking on the council's website. We don't really have a policy as such. I've just seen a social media guideline, and it lists the social media accounts we have, stuff like that. So are we looking at putting any sort of formal policies in place? Because on this one here where it says rules of community, yeah, I agree about removing comments where they might be harassing and abusive and stuff like that, and looking at the guidelines set out by the Crown Prosecution Service, which is great. But how do we monitor that? Do we have a member of staff sat there constantly scrolling on social media, or is it just hit and miss? So I'd like to know how that's actually policed. And also looking at devolution, how is the communication side working with the other authorities going? Because obviously this is something that has to be absolutely right for the public as well as us as councillors, so we can all clearly understand what's going on. And when we talk about interactions, I know you've touched upon it, like 500 interactions, stuff like this. They're good numbers, yeah, granted, but then I always look at the percentage terms and say, well, you know, Bournemouth alone, we're looking at a population of about 40,000. So it's tiny in comparison to the amount of people actually there. And I appreciate it's a hard task because you've got different social media platforms, you've got different generations, some don't necessarily use it, stuff like that. So are there any magical wands out there or council procedures that other councils are using to hit, target, whatever, other groups, demographics that we are not currently? Have we looked into that? There's a lot there to chew on, so enjoy.
Blue Sky, we set up an account a little while back. I don't think it's necessarily taken off to the extent that people thought that it would. To be honest, we've pretty much doubled down on our use of Facebook, and although the sort of X account is still there, I think, well, yeah, for those of us in politics, we perhaps accord a disproportionate significance to X. It really is a little bit of an echo chamber. My sense is that if we're able to expend some extra time, resource and energy on social media over the next year, it will be directed towards Instagram and TikTok. I think that will be the better use of it. We might look at duplicating everything that goes out on Twitter onto Blue Sky, just so that it's there. But I wouldn't be inclined to spend much more resource on that. In terms of social media guidelines, policies, and some of the guidelines that exist are for councillor use of social media. We do have a more detailed sort of social media protocol as part of the broader sort of comms department protocol. I think we can circulate that to members. You probably have seen it before, but no harm in circulating that again. In terms of monitoring the comments that come in on our official channels, how does that work practically, Bernie?
Beg your pardon. We actually monitor it within the team ourselves, but I'm exploring having a discussion with Zen City to see if they can do even more, not only just break down the demographics as Councillor Clarkson has alluded to, but actually what else they could do. Particularly fascinated with Facebook, just because some of the books, some of the accounts we're not actually privy to within the communications departments. That's part of the discussion I'm having with Zen City at the minute.
Yeah. And LGR, again, Bernie sits on the comms group that includes the comms lead from every one of the 10 borough and district councils, plus the county council, plus the police and crime commissioner's office. Look, it's been a relatively smooth but very time-intensive process up until now. If you can imagine having to get statements cleared between 12 different sets of officers, 12 different sets of politicians across all of those local authorities, what you end up with is very broad brush, dare I say it, lowest common denominator stuff. But until now, of course, the job has been really about communicating process. We're only just reaching the point at which we will have substance in terms of the different unitary options that are on the table, which authorities land behind which unitary option. And also up until now, I've kind of described it as shadow boxing, because we've kept the sort of Hertfordshire collaboration piece together by moving towards one LGR final submission to MHCLG that includes 3 different options within it. As different authorities start to line up behind different options, it might become significantly more difficult to always put out statements that occupy a sort of broad middle ground. If you want to add anything on that? No. And then the last point on number of respondents. Look, when we talk to other local authorities about the difference Zen City has made, we are stratospherically higher than them. I know that local authorities using, and it's really only Zen City and Commonplace that are the 2 AI engagement platforms specifically designed for UK local authorities that are out there. We were one of the pioneers with Zen City, and as a cohort of local authorities, we really are ahead of those who don't have it. So, I mean, yes, we'd always like the numbers to be higher, but again, let's bear in mind, if 500 responses is a nationally statistically significant number, I think consistently getting response rates around that number or above is a pretty good place to be.
Thank you. Just in answer to Councillor Sullivan's point about the task of finishing communications, I've just been informed that it's coming to December Cabinet. Thank you very much. So we're going to go now to Councillor Sussman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of my points have been covered by others, so I won't repeat them. And actually, the sort of 2 points that I'm left with kind of lapse into a bit of a sort of financial area. But with platforms such as Zen City, I mean, how long do you sign up for? Because given that we as an authority are sort of disbanding, there's no point signing up to a 5-year contract if obviously that's not going to happen. And then that sort of does lapse into obviously then we need, which will come to financial strategy of where else we're tied into stuff that we're not going to benefit from. So that's my first thing, is how long that is for Zen City. On the recruitment, and I spent about 10 years working in recruitment in a previous life, and it's obvious why it's very hard to recruit at the moment. But is it financially prudent of us as an authority to be expanding our headcount? Because if we look, you know, we're going to have to be making redundancies and things, you know, in only a couple of years. And should we not be consolidating more internally and looking to not lose the staff and to retain as much as we can, which might be more cost effective, to invest in current staff and do what we can for them than to recruit so much? Thank you.
Okay, we initially procured Zen City under the procurement process for a 3-year period. We're renewing for another 3-year period that will take us right up to the vesting day of the new authority. I think that as Hertsmere, we might decide that we have an interest in the new unitary authority, whatever area it covers, having the capacity to specifically consult with and engage with Hertsmere residents. So there'll be a conversation nearer the time as to whether or not we feel it's appropriate to put a mechanism in place for that, which obviously the contract would simply transfer over to the new authority. It's an open question. Look, on the recruitment piece, and I will answer the question, but I don't want to stray too far into matters that are the remit of Personnel Committee, because really we're here to talk about the comms campaign that ran around the recruitment imperative, because that was a policy decision to do it. But look, I think we have to be really careful about the language we use, because this is about people's jobs. I'm not expecting to see a plethora of redundancies in relation to local government reorganisation at most levels of the council staffing, because at the end of the day it's going to take the same number of operatives to empty the bins. There's going to be the same number of planning applications for this area and so on. Where the key efficiencies will be achieved will be at very, very senior officer level. But of course there will be new opportunities for very senior officers opening up within the new mayoral strategic combined authority. In terms of sort of whether or not it's the right time to be increasing the headcount, look, we as an administration inherited an authority where the staffing had been absolutely hollowed out to the extent that there was no skin on the bones. And although we did make some early changes to address that, the independent LGA peer review team identified lack of capacity, particularly at senior level, as a huge weakness impacting upon our delivery to deliver some of the more significant pieces of work that we've all committed to deliver in advance of LGR. Where we have recruited new posts, we've done it in a sensible way. We've used things like fixed term contracts and so on. I don't believe that our expenditure on staffing is indulgent at all. I think it's still very lean. I think we still get incredible value for money from our sort of officer corps when you consider that really until we recruited the new director level post, we've been running with just 2 directors for a number of years, with quite an expanding and ambitious workload. I think it was very clear that the need was there. The sort of only significant staffing expansion that is really on the agenda sort of moving forward will be the new sort of project management team, but that in and of itself is a centralised project delivery facility that's designed to actually increase and enhance efficiency across the organisation, and the kind of savings that it will make will probably more than justify the expenditure, but that will be sort of set out in reports coming down the line. So I understand where you're coming from, and it is a constant balancing act, but I think that given everything that we all want to achieve collectively over the next 2 or 3 years, we need to make sure we've got the officer resource to deliver it.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, and thank you, Jeremy, for that. As you know, comms is an area I take a lot of interest in, and the thing about comms is it's very subjective, and no 2 people will do anything one story in exactly the same way. So thank you for outlining all the hard and very high quality work that is done. Let me go back to the task and finish group, because my thoughts on policy in this area are filtered through the recommendations from the task and finish group. What are your own thoughts on what we recommended?
Look, I don't want to go too far in preempting the management board and cabinet discussions that will be reported back in December for debate, but I'm happy to set out my personal thoughts, which are that it is a mixed bag. I think that well, I'll start with the areas I am less aligned with, which is I think that a number of the recommendations made by the Task and Finish group create the risk of blurring the distinction between the role of officers and the role of members. We have a expert professional officer team that at the end of the day are there to deliver the day-to-day output. My personal view is that as members we need to be prepared to empower those officers and step back from seeing our role as to get out our red pens and sort of put dots, commas and words in here and there. I think where we really can make a difference is where we think that sort of draft materials or comms plans are kind of out of kilter in terms of tone, direction or the overarching message. But I think that the recommendations around sort of specific roles for cabinet members in taking reports from sort of other councillors and sort of feeding them in on drafts and so on possibly go a step further than I would like to see, but I'm sure that we will be able to find a middle point and a balance. Look, I think that one of the most positive things the Task and Finish group has recognised is that although it may be perfectly formed, it is a very small team, even for an authority of this size. And living in a world of social media, 24/7 rolling news, in an environment where actually Hertsmere is playing an increasing role in the national picture, film and TV, data centres, all of the growth, the housing and planning issues. It's a team that at its core is sort of 2.4, 2.5 people. Yes, I know we have a bit of extra support on the local plan, but really they're part of the planning team, not part of the comms team. I think that the fundamental recognition by the Task and Finish group that we're significantly under-resourced is absolutely of the essence, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
I'm going to allow, but this is difficult because we're at 7:42 already, we're not even through it. Quick reply, a question from Councillor Clarkson and Sussman.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate it. It's only because we've been talking so much about social media. Councillor Newmark, I just wanted to ask about non-social media, and Bernie, you might have a view on this. Obviously, we have Hertsmere News. Politically, you'd probably agree, if you run a campaign, you don't just put out the one big leaflet. And it's beautiful, glossy, I read it cover to cover, do our residents. And so there could be something like Aycliffe, which is there on page 7, but it's gone out with the pizza leaflets, or the husband's put it somewhere. And I was wondering, is there any way of measuring how successful Hertsmere News is? Because anyone over 65 plus isn't on social media, but by goodness, they're going to have an opinion on the Aycliffe Pavilion, for example. Is there any way we could maybe look at how successful it is, and maybe it could do with a tweak? I think it's great because we showcase local things and it's good, but things can get lost in a big glossy magazine. Just wondering if I could gauge your thoughts on that, Councillor Newmark, and Bernie as well, maybe.
Can I just add to that, because it's quite linked about one of the questions, because I've been quite involved, obviously, in the Meadow Park, and we use Zen City a lot, and that was actually the basis of a lot of the recommendations for it. But that is social media. It's done by QR codes. Do we measure the age bands and the age groups of all the replies? Because are we missing the people who would be dog walking, going for walks? I am just really concerned, and I found that in the results to Meadow Park, that we are reaching the right targets as well, and how we're measuring that and the facts and figures of that.
Yeah, look, we do segment, and I know that our community engagement officers also reach out to supplement the sort of social media piece. I don't know if they I think they did do this on Meadow Park. Is, you know, they do it to the extent of sort of door knocking with iPads, and they literally fill in the questionnaires and so on for the people. So I'm not aware that we've picked up any demographic that was missed on Meadow Park or any of the other surveys. In terms of Councillor sort of Clarkson's point, look, you're absolutely right. Print still matters. The first Zen City survey that we did was on how we communicate, and we tested the notion of cutting the number of editions, we tested the notion of going digital only, we tested the idea of just delivering to distribution points, and the message came back loud and clear. We value Hertsmere News, we do read it, and we want it to continue in that form. I know that Elstree and Borehamwood Town Council have recently taken the decision to reinstitute the Town Crier as a door-to-door publication after the previous administration scrapped that, and I think that's another vote of confidence in print. And then look, I'm acutely aware that in some parts of the borough in particular, putting a leaflet through the door is the only way to ensure a message gets to people, and we haven't shied away from doing that. On the Aycliffe Pavilion consultation, we did 2,000 leaflets through doors in neighbouring postcodes? More. And that's actually not something the council's done for a long time, and when it comes to some of the sort of hyperlocal consultations, we will, because at the end of the day you print 1,000 leaflets for 60 quid, right? We won't shy away from doing that.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last point. Something else that is not social media is the screen. Do you feel that the screen that was put up on the building has offered our residents value for money? And how do you monitor the percentage time of when it's off and when it's on? Because it has been off several times when I've driven past. And this is in daytime hours. Like, I'm not driving around at 3 in the morning or anything. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think it's been excellent value for money. We don't have local newspapers anymore. Beyond social media, we have limited ways to get our message across. Pretty much every other municipal headquarters building you see has some form of digital display outside. It's not a standalone screen. It's absolutely our intention, subject to sort of assessing how this has worked and how the one we're going to be installing very shortly on Shenley Road works, to have a network of these screens around the borough displaying the same messages and offering local organisations the ability to communicate their messages on top. It's something members of the public have asked for, and in this era in which local print media no longer exists, we have to do everything we can to pump out our messages. And I think we have to start thinking in a different way. We have to stop thinking like it's just our job to get our messages out through newspapers and channels that other people own, and we have to endeavour to actually become content providers ourselves. So the screen's not a one-off, and it won't stand alone for too long. In terms of when it's on and when it's off, it's all to do with highways, safety restrictions and brightness. I think it goes off at about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. It is off occasionally during the day, but that only happens when it's being updated or there's another technical issue to be sorted out. But generally, I don't think we're at the point where we have a summary of the number of times and how long it's been off, but it's sort of occasional for a few minutes at a time if it's off during the day. Yep. So maybe you've just been unlucky in terms of when you passed it, Natalie.
Councillor Riley, thank you.
I just wanted to ask related to Gen City, like we're getting all the feedback and comments from the residents. So how we are feeding them back that how their comments and feedback and surveys have helped us to take the decisions and led to the decisions, or how we have taken the actions according to their feedback and surveys.
Sure. So Zen City's got some really snazzy reporting mechanisms that are open to portfolio holders and officers and so on, so that they can really drill down not just into survey data but into that sentiment analysis and social listening. On top of that, there is a weekly summary of media coverage and social media activity. Does that get circulated to all councillors? Or yeah, so you should get that. It's very top line. I don't want to overload people with information, but it does include that a summary is pretty much of feedback from media and individuals on social media. And then, of course, we rely on yourselves as councillors as well. You're part of that consultation, engagement and feedback loop.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Newmark, thank you very much for the detailed answers. About Facebook, and I understand that Hertsmere as an organisation doesn't get involved in Facebook discussions on different pages and groups. It just puts it out. But I have noticed now that officers are now getting involved in groups and putting their replies officially with their names. Is that a change in policy?
So until now, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. The sort of operating principle, I would say, rather than any written policy, has been not to engage in groups, but that's also been heavily influenced by the fact that a number of the major groups in the area have not allowed official council accounts to join their groups. I'm not aware that we have specifically changed tack on that. I am aware that we are becoming increasingly conscious of disinformation, misinformation, and the impact that it can have on community cohesion, community relations, and so on. And I know that comms officers have tapped into training available on that through the LGA and so on. I know there have been conversations about the extent to which we might formally weigh in. But I mean, Bernie, do you want to come in on this? I'm not aware that we have started doing that.
As a complete policy, I don't think that we have, but we have been monitoring it. So where there has been disinformation or something that's been reported that could cause speculation in the community, what have you, then working with the officers, we've agreed just to actually go back and respond. I think it's been quite positive, and it tends to actually then, pardon the phrase, but kill the story, if you like, just in terms of it flaring up and gaining momentum. And certainly we've been approached by a number of officers to encourage us to do it a little bit more.
I think that's important, as long as the message flows, but I think they should be involved because, as you said, disinformation is so dangerous and it's important to nip it. But one last question, and it's about LGR. Can you guarantee then that any new people we take on will be on fixed term contracts? Because I am very concerned. I'm hearing things that we are going to be recruiting for different departments, etc. And we do know that LGR is going to happen, and we're then tying them into any risks of cost to the council with redundancies, etc. So I think it makes absolute sense that we should be taking on people, absolutely for the reasons you've said, but they should be on fixed term contracts. Is that something you agree with?
No, it's not. I think that it's, first of all, a function of the recruitment market. If the only way, for example, we can recruit competent planners is to offer permanent contracts, then in a scenario in which we have a shortage of planners and 3 more years in which we have to process planning applications and deliver a local plan, I'm not going to restrict ourselves to fixed term contracts. In terms of costs of redundancy and so on, I think that that's a complete misunderstanding of the way the LGR process will work, because at the end of the day, redundancy costs will be met out of a costs of LGR budget rather than the council's annual revenue funding. So it's not suddenly going to impact on the council's ability to function and deliver services in the last year of its existence. And all of the guidance from government is that we should continue on a business as usual model. I do think that it will in many cases be expedient and perhaps fairer to applicants in roles at a number of different levels to default to fixed-term contracts, but I certainly don't think that that will be a one-size-fits-all approach. Sorry, I've got a handful of slides on the general leader role as an extension of the comms piece. Really just to summarise the some of the key policy imperatives that we've been pushing in recent months. I think it's really clear that we have gone on a huge diversity push in light of the various challenges out there in public discourse and wider society around the whole diversity agenda, speaking with cross-party voices where possible after the Manchester bombing, amplifying things like the first ever Hertsmere specific Pride event organised by Borough Town Council, the aftermath of the Air India bombing, and so on. And I think we're building this up over time. If you look at the power of some of the diversity focused images that we've managed to push out, I think that sends out a very important message. Secondly, we've really embarked upon this strand of promoting Hertsmere as a centre for film and filming for obvious reasons. It's the kind of sustainable, measurable, scalable growth that we're looking to promote in and around the borough. We have leveraged the 40th anniversary of EastEnders, the 100th anniversary of Elstree Film Studios. The council's now receiving very significant amounts of income for location filming in the area, for the licenses that we charge for. We're not going to steal anyone's thunder. I'll save time tonight by not showing you the video clip, but we've produced a economic growth department together with comms have produced a really punchy, powerful short video promoting the area as a location for filming. I spoke last night at the UK Screen Investment Summit dinner. We're really ramping up the extent to which we project and promote Hertsmere in that area, and the ubiquitous LGR rears its head again. We've probably said enough about it this evening. I'm not going to go into much more detail than I have already. I'll pause there.
Any questions on this section from members? Let's move on. Councillor Newmark.
Good. How do I get to the...
Probably IT support. I think that's one.
Thank you. Look, I'm really going to do my best here to keep this short and to the point. I've adopted the same approach as comms. I'm not going to go over a complete overview of the service. That's for the Operations Scrutiny Committee. I am going to try and look at things from a policy perspective, really with the policy paradigm that I set out when I last did this portfolio in detail with you back at the end of 2023, which we summarised under the broad slogan of looking to sweat our assets to get the maximum yield for local people and businesses. But I have put up in this first slide, just for those of you that are less familiar with it, the list of categories in our asset portfolio, because I think we often lose sight of the sort of diversity, sort of everything from this building, the commercial properties, the shops, the studios themselves, which have been a huge asset management challenge over recent years, garage sites, our leisure centres, the growing number of community buildings and spaces, the various depots, those residential properties that we still own, our TA, and then of course the department also has responsibility for our engineering and sanitary drainage services. Here's the bottom line for the financial year ahead. A net annual this is in local government accounting, isn't it? Yes, so our net annual contribution is a positive of 4.5 million. I got worried when I saw the brackets around it, which isn't bad. It certainly continues to sort of look healthier from year to year. I'm hoping that number will be boosted more significantly by the reactivation of stages 7, 8, 9 at the film studios. But I think that all things considered, given the age of some of our key assets, this is not a bad place to be in at all. Right, our key policies on the asset management front, which we now have numbers and codes for. Thank you to... Well, I should, by the way, it's very remiss of me, because it's only a few months ago that Andrew was promoted to the role of head of service, and really since he's been in post, he's absolutely transformed the way that our asset portfolio is run and managed. It is it's been a tall order. It's been a difficult time of transition. You know, there was an appointment made that we inherited that wasn't quite right. We identified stuff like the entire portfolio being run off a spreadsheet, and a lot of work's been done in the back office behind the scenes to put proper processes and quality control in place. And I think we're now all feeling a lot more confident, and a large amount of that is due to Andrew and his team. But the key policies are all sort of listed there. I'm not going to sort of read them off screen, but we actually now sort of do have policies around acquisition and disposal, which have been sort of quite pertinent given some of the debates that have happened in recent months. As I say, I do have policies around accurate records of our assets, so no more selling buildings that we don't actually own. Obviously, we talk a lot about achieving best return and best value, but we're constantly looking to refine the way we actually identify and quantify that increasingly with a view towards factoring social and community value into those calculations. Right, core functions undertaken by the department. I'll just sort of pick out some of these to highlight. I won't go through all of them, but the amount of work actually involved with leases, acquisitions and disposals is vast, and it's not something that we were doing in a thorough methodical way in the past, but really now we have proper centralised management of all our property transactions, lease arrangements, renewals and so on, to ensure that everything is not just fully compliant but a model of best practice. Maybe focusing on condition and compliance management. This involves ensuring that all of our buildings and facilities meet statutory legal requirements, remain safe, accessible and operational, subject to regular inspection and reporting, so hopefully no more asbestos or rack concrete surprises. Perhaps sort of focusing on the last two, fault reporting and issue resolution, we now have really robust systems in place for prompt reporting, actually tracking resolutions right the way through to ensure maximum efficiency and satisfaction for the end users, be it ourselves or tenants, so on. And something that we were not properly on top of, that we now are, is the whole area of administering and managing service charge regimes, ensuring that we are transparently and accurately recovering costs. Let's move on to the second of those policies. I wanted to home in on the first bullet point here, which is again something that I promised from this portfolio at the outset, that we would move towards evidence-driven decision making. We'd use the data that we have, the condition surveys, the performance metrics and so on, to actually inform our investment priorities and long-term planning. And we'll come to some examples of that in a few moments. The ongoing hot potato of local authorities delivering capital projects. We have really robust mechanisms in place now for actually designing and delivering those projects effectively, on budget and on time. We saw recently with stages 7, 8, 9 at Elstree, but we will also see, and are already seeing, with progress on projects like Bushy Golf and Country Club. Project governance is something that Andrew's actually revolutionised. Each project has proper governance boards, paperwork, processes, audit trails. This is being run like a proper asset portfolio, a proper set of projects, not sort of on the corner of somebody's desk anymore. We really inherited things at a very low bar, and as I say, it's not the sort of work and improvement that you read about on the front pages every week, but it is really solid and important work that goes on behind the scenes. Acquisitions and disposals. Again, this is a suite of policies that do everything that we've set up there in terms of discipline, transparency, compliance, strategic direction, and so on. Obviously, the key value of having those policies is our ability to maximise the value from those assets, and that doesn't always mean getting the best financial return. And I think the way in which we applied those policies to take the recent decision over Newbury's car park is quite a good example of how having decent, robust policies doesn't always mean that the decision that might look best for the accounting books is going to be the decision that wins the day if it's not right for the community. Again, to highlight that, we've got the piece in there on supporting community benefits, everything from incorporating social value criteria into the acquisition and disposal business cases, like prioritising affordable housing, community use, local employment, and so on. Just to sort of jump out of the policy list for a moment, but I've included this slide because I wanted to bring together and give a really practical example of how our evidence-driven decision-making imperative from policy A2 and our suite of policies in area A3 kind of coming together in real practical terms. As people know, we have a 107 garage forecourt sites in our asset portfolio. In fact, I say, as people probably know, but nobody would have actually known that until about 8 or 9 months ago, because we didn't know institutionally how many of these we owned. So even that statistic in and of itself shows the extent to which things have improved. The team did this cross-service desktop study, cross-departmental, 3D imagery, Google Maps and so on. They identified 67 of the sites that sort of percolated to the top of the list against set criteria that can be used for housing development, retention or disposal in terms of the way forward. They had 3 days of intensive site visits undertaken by a multidisciplinary team, produced a detailed report for each site, ownership plans, photos, cross-service commentary, and they then assessed each site against 15 set weighted criteria and scored them. And as a result of those sort of scoring results, they sort of will be fitted into those identified categories above in terms of moving forward for housing development, sort of retain them as they are or look to dispose of them for capital receipts. We included their ability to deliver new homes as a key imperative in those rankings. And just to give you an idea of the kind of results this is achieving is that we now have a very clear idea and are able to move towards action on the top 10 sites, which themselves will deliver 100 affordable homes, which is really, really significant. I don't think we've said that anywhere publicly until tonight, but that is another 100 on the growing affordable home delivery programme that this administration is prioritising. Back to policies, I think I've sort of touched on the importance of moving forward with maintaining accurate records. This really sort of brings it all together. I'm not going to go into details of any of these, but happy to if people have questions on them. Flood risk, we are the statutory land drainage authority, which means we continue to discharge our responsibilities for Hertsmere under the Land Drainage Act 1991 and a stack of relevant local bylaws. The flood risk piece and drainage management includes responsibility for maintaining designated watercourses, flood defences and surface water draining systems where we have responsibility to reduce flood risk and protect property. Emergency response and incident management in those areas speaks for itself, and the ongoing work providing technical advice and guidance to everybody from residents, developers and partner organisations on everything within the scope of drainage responsibilities, flood warnings and ownership of watercourses. Next, some key successes. I already touched on the fact that we are on an income generation pathway with innovative income streams being developed using creative approaches. We are sweating those assets. We are maximising revenue, and at the same time we're finding it possible to enhance those all-important community benefits. I've talked a little bit about project governance. We have an overarching project delivery board now that strengthens oversight, accountability and decision-making. We are implementing a medium-term asset management plan to guide delivery, investment and resource prioritisation. Value generation. We don't talk enough in terms of value generation, but we can say that we are delivering really significant, actually, financial and strategic value relative to the size of the council's balance sheet and ensuring assets contribute effectively to corporate objectives. And we are in a position, again, sort of for the first time, to quantify that. As I say, we're doing it relative to the council's overall balance sheet, and moving forward, I think we'll have quite an interesting set of numbers that we are able to put into the public domain. Portfolio optimisation, well, I've given you the usage of our garage space as one example of that. And final slide, promise, key challenges at a policy level moving forward. And I've alluded to the first one. We have got an older estate. I'm not just talking about the studios, but our estate does require increasingly frequent maintenance, both for safety and compliance reasons, but also just to maintain the ongoing level of operational performance that we require from it. There's that recruitment and retention stuff, again, which seems to be the theme of today. It is a specific issue in the asset management department, particularly around chartered surveyors. The onset of LGR doesn't help with recruitment, and there are real challenges on that front right now. Balancing competing priorities, I guess the main one there is this sort of constant balancing act between the need to make money out of our assets and the need to deliver benefits for the community as well. I'd like to think we are increasingly getting that right. We can't always ensure we maximise or get the sort of community benefit we'd like to see out of every site due to sort of tight interpretations of best value duty and so on, but where we are able to push the envelope, we have done, and we will continue to do so. I've talked about the challenges and complexity of data management, and look, fittingly, financial constraints sits at the end, but our ever-limited budgets make the notion of implementing things like an invest-to-save strategy or an invest-to-earn set of initiatives much more challenging, and it's a constant juggling and prioritisation act. But I think with the fantastic team that we've got under Andrew's leadership, we are doing much better than we were, and we are sort of increasingly in a position where our assets are working as hard as they possibly can for local people, local businesses and local communities. That's it.
Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Clarkson first, then Councillor Butler, Councillor Allen, then I've got a few as well.
Oh no, did you get in? Did you get in as well?
Thank you, Councillor Cohen, and thank you, Councillor Newmark, for the presentation on asset management and council estate. You mentioned a lot about best return versus best value with regard to the A2 policies and this whole thing about getting money versus the benefits to the community. Now, I just wanted to bring up the cabinet reports on Theobald Street and the Director's Arms sites, both in Boreham Wood, obviously where I'm a councillor. They've been disposed of via open market sale to private developers, and it was cited financial prudence, risk avoidance, which I totally get. But is there a reason why, actually, as we've detailed about the benefits to the community, why we're not prioritising as a council, either direct development or working with kind of partnership models to deliver the maximum delivery of social housing or kind of affordable housing, particularly in a high demand area such as Boreham Wood?
Look, I don't agree with your assessment. I don't agree that that's not what we're doing. In fact, we have acted in order to enable us to do exactly that. This isn't the forum to talk too much about specific sites, but you've referenced two of them, and on one of those sites, by going to market and working with a developer, not only are we maximising value in terms of capital receipt on that site, we are creating a scenario in which we will be able to deliver an affordable social component on another site. You can look at each property transaction in its own little box, right? And you can say, well, sold that site off privately, you're getting this, you're not getting that, that's a terrible deal. Or you can look at the manner in which I prefer to conceptualise it, which is okay, that's a deal that's been done on that site. What are we doing with the money that we've achieved? That is a site that is very close to the station. It's a piece of prime property in the centre of Boreham Wood, but the capital receipt that we will achieve from it will enable us to deliver a significant number of community benefits and affordable homes elsewhere in Boreham Wood. And I think that we have to increasingly look at the bigger picture rather than each individual deal. The other site that you mentioned, and look, the facts are we have achieved a scenario in which we will get more affordable and social homes on one site than the alternative option offered us across two sites. We will also get a large brand new community space adjacent to that site that will bring medical provision in the form of a community diagnostic centre to the south of Boreham Wood. So you can again put the director's arms in a little box on its own and say, did you or didn't you get the best possible deal for that? Well, actually, I think we did, because we're getting a capital receipt plus new homes plus affordable and social far quicker than we would ever be able to build them. But then at the same time, we'll be getting all of those community benefits from the adjacent sites. So, whilst it's really easy to kind of disassemble the Lego bricks and look at sites and deals in an individual way, I think that the strategy we've adopted is a more holistic one. And if we can leverage one site somewhere in the borough to bring huge benefits to a multiplicity of other sites elsewhere in the borough, we shouldn't be closed to that idea.
I need to come back on that, Councillor. They're great words, really great words you're using to justify. We would never deal with a private developer in the same way. You were the first one to always demand we get the policy compliance or more social housing. We've just brought up two sites. Neither of them are compliant on affordable or social housing. Is this something your administration will be proud of? Social rent, we are desperate for it. The site that you mentioned, we mentioned in Theobald Street, prime, near the station, near the bus garages, within walking distance of all the shops. That is prime for affordable housing where people don't need cars. We can maximise the desperate needs we have. You know, and I do, that we are the highest of private rental markets. We've got the highest for non-affordability of homes within Eastern England. And our council is selling our sites and not getting policy compliance. I think it's not correct.
Well, we're getting more than policy compliance because we're getting more social and affordable homes, and we're actually delivering those homes than we would by taking an alternative route. Am I proud? Yeah, I'm absolutely proud of it. And let me tell you what I'm really proud of. I'm proud of the fact that we took the Director's Arms site that your administration left vacant and derelict for year after year after year, have brought it back into use. We're going to get homes there, we're going to get social, we're going to get affordable, and we're going to get medical provision in that part of Boreham Wood. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that across other sites in Boreham Wood, whatever the specifics around Theobald Street may be, as a whole, and on other sites across the borough, we have delivered more affordable homes in 2.5 years than the previous administration delivered in over a decade. We're delivering the homes, we're delivering the affordable homes, we're delivering the social rent. We are taking sites that have been left vacant and derelict, bringing no benefit to the borough for many years, putting them back into use for the benefit of local people. No, it's not just words, it's delivery.
Okay, I just have to draw people's attention. The only reason you've got more affordable housing is because of percentage, because you've actually given up more and more grey and green belt to provide more housing. That is the truth. But I would like you to come back with next year and prove to us that there is going to be medical provision on that site. Because as you know, there is no proof there is going to be medical provision. And you need to be open and honest. So we're selling a site with no proof for a medical provision. We'll move on questions now. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One very easy one, okay? Well, I hope it's easy anyway. The policy on garages. Under that, on the Hertsmere website, it still says, you know, what can these garages be used for parking motor vehicles only, storage or of commercial use are not allowed. We know that residents are using it for storage. Is it about time we actually look at this policy itself, or is this an issue where it comes with insurances and stuff like that? Because a lot of the garages now, you can't get a modern sized vehicle in it. So I'm just wondering if I can get an answer on that one. And also the other couple of things you mentioned within your presentation, I picked up on it when you said about so thank you. You mentioned in your presentation about the council tried selling off assets that didn't belong to them. When was that, Councillor Newmark? I'd be curious to know when that was and what was that asset, if we're allowed to know that detail. And also you mentioned about an Excel spreadsheet list that we never had actually a list of our assets. So what caused that and when was it put correct? I'd like to know those answers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So dealing with the garage licences, we have actually drafted a licence that now allows storage. I'm working with legal on it because we need to control what people store. We would not want people to fill it full of paint, buckets of paint or, hundreds of litres of fuel for their lawnmower. So we're just working through the detail, but we have actually drafted it. I would like to think by the end of the year we will have agreed that.
Selling off assets that we shouldn't have been selling off, didn't properly own. That was a particular asset in the Potter's Bar area, which was a feat that was achieved by our predecessors. The issue of... sorry, what's the second one?
So the list of assets.
Yes, the list of assets being managed from a spreadsheet and lease compliance milestones being managed from a spreadsheet. Again, this was the norm under our predecessors, and in fact one of the consequences of that was over an extended period there were probably, I'm told by officers at the time, around £1 million lost in service charges that could have been levied that were not. All shocking gaps in the system, if I put it politely, that we've had to rectify in recent years.
So Alan, you're next.
Yeah, I think the garages work is really good. I think the garages work is really good and a very positive thing, and to be encouraged. My question is about the first slide that we saw, and in effect, put simply, the profit on our assets is £4.5 million a year, which you say is pretty good. Is there a target to achieve in that? How much more would you like to earn from our assets? Is there a target? And if so, how will we achieve it?
The net annual contribution is obviously a revenue-based contribution. If we did not have the backdrop of LGR, I would very happily turn around and say that I'd put a number on the extent by which I would like to increase that figure. We are working against a backdrop of LGR, which means that I'm going to put this very carefully. Every time we assess the future of an asset, there is an additional dimension to consider when we look at whether or not we are seeking to squeeze revenue funding out of it, or perhaps leverage a capital receipt from it. Obviously, the more assets that we leverage capital receipts from, the less potential there is to bolster that net annual contribution figure. So it's not a straightforward question, given the scenario in which we find ourselves. We're not the only council that is going through this dilemma on sort of every single asset that it looks at. It's a conversation that's being repeated certainly in all of the boroughs and districts around Hertfordshire. What I would say is that, I think that we have to have in mind the fact that not only do we need to continue to keep our revenue budget balanced for the next 3 years, we also need to leave whatever new unitary is responsible for this area with an asset base that enables them to do the same. But where we have assets that can make a significant contribution to us achieving some really big things in a really short space of time, we need to be prepared to look at the value of those assets in a manner that is not revenue focused.
Does that mean that major acquisitions are a no-no now?
I think that one of the reasons we have an acquisitions policy is that we would look at every possible acquisition, every potential acquisition as a case in its own right. I don't think that we're saying for a moment major acquisitions are a no-no. Yeah, we know we need to deliver lots more affordable and social homes, and if acquisitions become available that might help us to do that, we would be foolish not to look at them. We know that we have an imperative to deliver economic growth in the area. We know we want to expand studio facilities and so on, but potential acquisitions have to be backed and supported by a proper business case. So there's absolutely not a blanket policy that veers away from them, but at the same time, the bar has to be set at a reasonable place.
Councillor Sullivan, then Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, and Councillor Newmark, you know I'm very detail driven, and I don't say anything in a committee unless I know the answer. And I think it's worth noting that when colleagues tonight have raised concerns about social housing, not affordable social housing, on some of the sites, Theobald's, Director's Arms, it's because in the reports that we had forward at Cabinet, the word social housing does not feature in those reports. So it mentions affordable housing, it doesn't address the social housing element, which is why members are asking that question, because it isn't clear in those reports that there would be social housing on those sites. So we're not being pedantic, it just clearly isn't in the reports. But moving on from that, where we do have developments and assets in the area, do we have a way of being able to acquire some of those units for temporary accommodation? Because I know we've got a huge waiting list for temporary accommodation. I know we've done some in the area, but it would be nice if we could acquire some units within developments, which means that we keep families, vulnerable people in their communities instead of being, using Luton, Dunstable, for wherever we, and Hemel Hempstead, where we may have temporary accommodation units, and actually keep people within their community elements. And is that something we can do alongside developers of sites to be able to increase our temporary accommodation assets? And then just my final points. There are some community sites that we, I believe, lease in Hertsmere, such as Oakmere Community Centre. How do we make sure that we're making best use of those community assets? I know there was a social media post last week that was saying that we have a new trustee management board for Oakmere Community Centre that will bring forward some changes. So how do we recruit into a new management board? How do we know what the community needs? And what are the plans going forward for those assets? Thank you.
Look, I do think you're being a bit pedantic here, because in housing legislation and government terminology, social housing is a category of affordable housing, and I think that is sort of widely understood and accepted. But I will be more than happy to look at the ways that we can make even more explicit the specific delivery successes that we are having in terms of socially rented accommodation in the area. So thank you for that suggestion. In terms of the so what was your second point?
About temporary accommodation, can we have more units?
It absolutely is a possibility. Hilary, are you able to help with this one at all on the housing front? Or okay, it absolutely is a possibility. There are sites that we have actually acquired over the past 2 years that have been used for that explicit purpose. There is another project that I'm not going to go into detail in this evening about providing a very specific form of temporary accommodation on or close to one or two of these garage sites. We need a mix. We want more temporary accommodation in the borough. We don't want to be have to be sending people outside of the borough. It's cheaper to put people in their own accommodation than it is to send them to hotels and B&Bs. So I mean, yes, it's something that we can do, and it's something that we always consider in the mix. It's also obviously not always the optimal use of a property. So the issue around usage of community centre sites. Andrew, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I can talk specifically about Oakmere, if that's what you'd like to hear about. So we were approached by one of the operators of one of the other community centres. They've formed a management company. We have agreed lease terms. We don't own the building. We only have a very short lease left because it's owned by county. We're assuming that post-LGR, the new unitary will own the whole site and we'll be able to do something different. But in the short term, that organisation are going to put quite a lot of money to fix that building up. It needs a lot of TLC and get it up and running and going. And it's backed by an Islamic organisation who I think are going to have a mosque in there temporarily. Or, sorry, not temporarily, but not a permanent mosque. I don't know what I mean by that. For press services when they need them.
Thank you. I suppose my question is, how would the community know an asset is available to be acquired for rent or taken on as a trusteeship or to run? How is that advertised? How would people know there's an opportunity for that community centre? Because I know it's been disused for a while. So how would people know that there's an opportunity to help put it back into fruition?
So we don't have very many vacant properties, but when we do, they're advertised on our council website, or we use local agents, as we did some of the disposals you've heard about today. And sometimes we use both.
I think Oakmere is a little bit of an outlier in terms of the state it was in. It's not like there were people kind of queuing up to take it on, and there was an added set of complications because of the relationship with county, which I know that you in particular will understand from your own experience of dealing with county on community centres. But I think the more general point you make is a really good one, that we do need to ensure that we are maximising the community benefit from community centre sites. I think that the nature of what people want from community centres is changing radically. It has changed radically and it continues to change. I also think that it's the case where you just need to look at the number of planning approvals that have gone through over the past couple of years where developers have committed to community space. There's going to be a lot more of these sites emerging over the months and years ahead, and we do need to understand how we can deploy them in the best possible way. I'm aware that we have some really well run and really well used community centres in and around Hertsmere, but I think we have perhaps a small number that are underused, and there's all sorts of historic reasons and legacies behind that. I know there's a particular community centre in Boreham Wood that we've asked the team to sort of look at, following reports that it's perhaps not being used to the best of its potential capacity, and it's something that we have to constantly keep under review, and local knowledge and input from local ward councillors on how those community centres in their own wards and localities are functioning is always the best way to get on top of it.
Councillor Sullivan, just coming back to TA properties for a minute. Whilst it's small numbers, we lease a lot of shops with the flats above. As they become vacant, we're now separating them out and we are putting the flats into TA. We've just done 2 of those on Hartford Road, as an example.
Thank you. I actually was going to ask about a mechanism for going, coming with ideas for assets that the council could purchase. So that's been answered. I'm also really pleased to see there's a project management office and a lot of robust procedures in place now, which is a very good thing. I'm guessing, though, that you do also have a mechanism for killing a project, because there will come a point, potentially with an asset, as you said, that's not fulfilling its remit. So do you have an example of something that is maybe not worth us managing anymore, and we are going to release it? Do you know what I mean by that? A project that is not
I can give you
worth
an example,
going
actually.
on. Thank you.
We own a shop in Bushy, and it's had an awful lot of damage from water and flooding and issues in the basement, which we fixed. But the damage was extensive to the whole building. We had a plan. It's quite a tall building. Our plan initially was to create a flat upstairs, sell the flat, which would then pay for all of the works to the building, and we could rent the shop like we always used to, and it would pay for itself. But actually, once we got it costed up, it was so expensive we couldn't afford it, so we had to cancel that project completely. We've actually ended up selling that property, or rather we've got agreement to sell it. We haven't concluded the legals yet, but that was our only way out. Otherwise, we were sat with a building that was expensive because it was sitting there falling apart. We're paying rates on it because we pay rates on empty buildings.
Thank you very much. No, I think it's important that we recognise that sometimes projects are not worth carrying on with, and they're good money after bad. And I think that's a good success story, as well as making money, is not wasting it. Thank you.
Any more questions, members? I just got one point, Andrew, that you mentioned about Oakmere Community Centre. Can you just confirm that that was on a list to be sold? An asset, Oakmere. But you said
no, we don't own the freehold.
No, but you said about when we have assets like that.
Yeah.
And was that one that was actually on a list? Because you said
no.
we put them on a list.
No,
because I've already had emails from people with concerns how this has been transferred. I just want to, for transparency.
Okay, there's some misinformation. We haven't transferred anything. We're going to give them a lease for the period of however long we've got left, which I think is, I'm going to say 6 years, but it's less than 10. And that's it. It was a building that was so run down that we did not think we would invest any money back into it. Have I not answered the question?
Sorry, that you haven't. No, because I think Councillor Sullivan asked how are groups aware of leases when they're available, and you said they're advertised. Was this one advertised?
No, it wasn't advertised because we didn't think it was an opportunity. We have such a short lease that you wouldn't invest the amount of money to fix it in the time period that we can offer a lease for. But this management company are seeing beyond our existence and into the new unitary.
Look, I'm going to come in on Oakmere because I can see exactly where you're going with this. And frankly, anybody with an interest in community facilities in Potters Bar has known about the state of Oakmere Community Centre for a number of years. Anybody who's known about the state of Oakmere in recent years has had the opportunity to do exactly what these forward-thinking, community-minded individuals did: come to the council, approach us with a constructive plan and proposal, and work with us to get it delivered. That opportunity is always there. That opportunity never needs to be advertised. If any community group out there feels that there is a council asset that is being underutilised, that they can work with us to bring back into community use, the doors are always open. So, if people are expressing concerns, then it would have been far more constructive for them to have actually come forward with their own plans when they knew that Oakmere was in the state it was in over so many years.
Any more questions? So thank you very much, Councillor Newmark, for answering the questions and for your presentation. I think the committee notes your presentation, and I don't think we have any actions from it. So let's move on to agenda item 6, the financial strategy, and it's presented by Matthew Bunyan, our Section 151 officer and Assistant Director of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting the draft financial strategy, which has been updated from the previous version. This was presented to the Cabinet, and they have recommended it to the committee for your review and comment, which will then be taken back to Cabinet prior to their recommendation to Council for adoption. So the last financial strategy was actually approved back in July 2018 and was for the 2018-19 through to 21-22 period, and it's appropriate that the strategy is updated on a regular basis. Unfortunately, due to other sort of priorities, that review didn't happen back then. So we'd just been through a period of Brexit. We then went into the COVID pandemic, which put an extreme amount of pressure on my team, which we're still recovering from, quite frankly. But also it changed the government priorities, and that has delayed the funding review, which has now been sort of significantly delayed, but we are now expecting that to come into play from next financial year. So I think it's very timely to bring forward a financial strategy, an updated financial strategy now. Can I just reassure the committee, though, that whilst the previous strategy hasn't been updated since 2018, on an annual basis as part of the budget cycle, we do always review the medium-term financial plan, we review the capital strategy, and we review the most current risks, uncertainties and pressures, and they're all reported through the budget process. So whilst the main element of the strategy hasn't been updated, there's significant elements of it that have been updated annually. I think obviously the revised strategy is now looking at what we consider to be the current economic conditions, changing government policy. In particular, you'll see that the strategy refers to local government reorganisation and the fair funding review and the review of business rates. Unfortunately, at this stage, elements of that may still need to change because we haven't had the fair funding review yet. Obviously, the Chancellor did make a policy statement this morning. That will be backed up by the budget on the 26th of November. Unfortunately for us, we probably won't find out what that actually means for us until around about the 17th or 18th of December. So obviously I'll be looking at that very keenly to sort of see what the impact of fair funding and the business rates review is going to have for us. And the strategy will need to be updated to reflect those changes and make it current before we adopt it. So at the moment, really, the document is a work in progress. I would obviously very much appreciate the committee's sort of comments that I can then take back and look to amend the document. I mean, the financial strategy sort of is integral to the Council's financial governance. It does set out some policies within the document as to how we manage and plan our financial resources. I think the strategy is picking up the current risks and sort of pressures on our finances as we understand them at the moment. It picks up new initiatives, things like simpler recycling, and all of that I hope is coming through the document. You'll notice that the MTFP, the medium-term financial plan in the financial strategy, has been updated from the version that was approved back in February Council. But the main changes there are only in respect of approvals that the Council have made since it adopted the current MTFP, which includes the sort of senior leadership restructure. It also reflects the spending review 25 in relation to core spending power, and actually the Chancellor's announcement around core spending power, which assumes a council tax uplift in accordance with current referendum limits. So whereas our previous strategy included a 2% uplift on council tax, it now includes a 3% uplift, and as I say, that's purely based on the spending review. So we're currently showing a gap of about 804,000 on the MTFP. However, committee should note that we're in the middle of the budget process for the 26-27. We're looking at all of the pressures and efficiencies that are being brought forward by heads of service in their particular service areas. We've been through a series of Star Chamber meetings to look at all of those, and we'll be looking to present the current budget position for next year to the budget panel next week, and that will set out where we are in terms of our current gap. So at the moment there will be further pressures to add to that 804, but there's also efficiencies that have been discussed and will come forward as part of that budget process. So I think this is an early draft, very much like the committee's views and any comments, so that they can be incorporated prior to the council adopting, and you'll see the timetable set out in the report, and obviously we're looking at adoption in January by the council ahead of setting the budget in February. That's all I've got to say at the moment, Chair, but obviously happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Matthew, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I appreciate, obviously, like you just said, until we hear more from central government and the money that we can hopefully still coming in from there. But I just want to highlight, really bring people's attention to the homeless one. I'm pretty concerning on the homeless stuff going on there and the budget there. I'm just trying to find it again. Sorry, I've been scrolling through. How homeless has doubled pretty much, and the pressures that we're finding there. That's the one. So I just wondered if we're looking, well, you guys are looking at the budget around that area as well, because obviously that's going to be quite a cost to the council if we're not getting the money and the support from central government, because that seems to be a worry for me. Sorry. Cheers.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is an area we've been raising in the budget as a significant risk for a number of years now. We did get additional funding from government last year on homelessness, and that was incorporated into the budget, and we are fully utilising that. We get just over £1 million in homelessness prevention grant. We also get other grants, Rough Sleepers grant, etc., that all relate to that homeless. It is a significant government priority at the moment. They are looking at, obviously, through fair funding, how the funding mechanism will be changed. We know that that grant is going to be split, and the temporary accommodation element is going to be separated out. I'm hopeful, and I'm not going to make any promises, that given the priority on homelessness, that the grant funding will continue at least at the same level. I mean, the housing team have managed homelessness very well over a number of years now by focusing on that prevention element, so actually dealing with the issue before people are presenting as homeless. And because of that, we have managed to very successfully manage our budgets over recent years, whilst dealing with, as you say, a doubling in the number of homeless families. Oh, yes, thank you, Hilary. Yes, there is a report coming forward to Personnel Committee which sets out a complete restructure of the Housing Department, which addresses absolutely this issue.
Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matthew, for delivering this report. You've got a really unenviable task, you and the team, because there are so many considerations here and so many unknowns at the moment as well. So I just wanted to know more about contingencies, and like Councillor Butler said, you know, the homelessness increasing that much, and we know that it's only forecast to get worse on there. Now there's certain things that, you know, that we do have what's the word, we do have ownership over, like, you know, the council tax can increase, but then with that comes maybe people may not be able to afford that, and we have levels there. And there's other things that can eat into this as well. You know, the local plan non-delivery will have impacts. If businesses can't pay their rates, that will have impacts. Homelessness increasing. And so where are the pinch points, and where would you find that extra money from? Will this mean that some capital projects won't go forward? Will there be pay reviews that maybe aren't going to be as high for our staff? I know this year we gave a 3%, but actually, what was it? The NJC actually gave 3.2. Can we guarantee staff pay and retention if it's going to get a little bit tight? Will there be increases in other paid services? So where's the money going to come from if we don't have any? And can our residents afford it? Or can we afford not to have it?
Right, thank you. A lot of questions in there. So, look, I think we have a statutory responsibility to set a balanced budget, and that's what we need to do, and we need to do that by February Council, ahead of setting the council tax, and then that council tax has to be set by the 11th of March. In terms of council tax increase, we are constricted by the referendum limit currently. Don't anticipate that to change, and certainly Spending Review 25 suggested that it would remain the same at 3% rather than going back to the 2% it was previously. Obviously inflation hasn't come down to where it was expected. It's still running a little bit higher. So actually 3% probably is not going to meet the inflationary increase we're seeing in our budgets. And as the Chief Finance Officer, I've got to recommend a 3% increase in council tax because we've got to maximise our revenues. But we are restricted on raising any other revenues. Obviously, we're looking at our entire budget. Every service head or assistant director will take and will go through a Star Chamber process where we review their entire budget. That looks at their expenditure, it looks at their income. Can we raise additional funds through increasing fees and charges? We can in some places, but obviously that's subject to the council agreeing that. Other fees and charges we can't actually increase because they're statutory. So we're particularly things like planning, so we're very limited there. We can look at how we can reduce costs by being more efficient, or ultimately cutting services, which we've managed to avoid doing for many, many years, and we don't want to start doing that now. So we're working as a senior leadership team to look at how we can present to members a budget that can be sustainable. But at the same time, we are trying to recognise all of these significant risks and pressures that are out there. We always build a contingency into the budget, so we will have a 300,000 contingency. Again, that's what I'll be recommending. And that really is there to support any pressures that we face during the year that we might have anticipated but weren't exactly sure what they were going to be. We focus very much on collection rates of business rates and council tax and what we can do, but we do also recognise that some people just can't afford to pay, and obviously we take that into consideration when we are trying to collect. In terms of staff pay, you're absolutely right. We fell behind again last year because actually the NJC approved slightly higher than our rate. We agreed at 3%. The National Joint Committee agreed 3.2%. So that again is a consideration which will be taken through Personnel Committee to recommend as part of the budget again. But yeah, staff will be expecting to get obviously a reasonable pay awards in line with the cost of living that they're experiencing. It's a very difficult juggling act and balancing act, but we've got to set a balanced budget.
And Chair, sorry if I may, just following on from that point, one small point, and I think it's really important actually, and I think this is such a huge emphasis that we should all be mindful of, is under in the appendix 3.12, the environmental health, is we've got a contingency, but if we do have another COVID event or a mass event or something else that happens in our borough. We need to be able to support residents, support our staff and keep our services there. And I don't think anyone foresaw COVID coming, but there can always be something else that happens, whether that be with flooding or a natural event or, you know, anything else that could happen. Not to be a catastrophizer, but we need to make sure that we can still have contingency there for what could happen.
Can I just come back on that? As I said, we have a 300,000 contingency within the revenue budget. That obviously is not going to deal with a catastrophe or something like that. But we do have a general fund reserve, and that is there for exactly that purpose. That is sitting just under 9 million at the moment. So we have got significant funds there to deal with a COVID outbreak or a significant flood or something like that where there is a massive impact. Generally, for situations like that, as we saw in COVID, the government will step in and provide funding. There's also something called the Bellwin scheme for disasters, and generally we would look to recover costs through that Bellwin scheme. But we have that general fund reserve there for those sort of emergencies. Gladly, we've not had to tap into it in the past.
Thank you, Chair. And just leading on from Councillor Sullivan's point, and actually Councillor Butler, a quick look together. I mean, it's quite worrying. Something like the disability credit rate and the local authority housing fund, if you look at that table, it just goes to zero after next year. And it is a concern. And obviously, you mentioned they were interested to get your comments on that services, you know, may have to be cut like that. And I suppose, as Councillor Sullivan says, if there's no money left, the only thing that's going to happen is council tax is going to go up. And I understand your point on the referendum limits, but obviously in the press recently, only a couple of days ago, there is this talk of 100% increases on bans and ban G&H properties. Also, the IFS saying that there could be a new kind of national tax which will immediately alleviate some of the problems we're having, because we've got an £804,000 shortfall in the next 2 years. If we look at LGR, if we maximise that over 10 authorities, and we're one of the richer ones, we're looking at over £8 million kind of problem here with LGR as well. It'd be good to gauge your thoughts. I know Councillor Shenton's not here to answer from a member's perspective, but just on tax, we know that referendum, that isn't going to be enough. Do you foresee a possibility where there's going to be different council tax bands, or, as Rachel Reeves mentioned 3 days ago, a possible 100% increase in bands F&G, which are, yes, so the richer properties, but there are pensioners there that aren't capital rich, and they'll be forced to sell early and move out of the community.
Okay, no, I'm not going to comment on government policy. What I will say is that district councils have had a council tax cap of 3%. For a few years now. Prior to that, it was 2%, or we had a £5 limit for a number of years as well. But the district councils network has been lobbying for a long time now, over a number of years, that actually that referendum cap should either be higher or should be removed altogether to enable districts to actually raise more revenues in order to balance its budget. So that lobbying has continued. And through the Fair Funding Review, hopefully we will get a response to that. That's not to say that we would necessarily then want to put our council tax up by more than 3%. Obviously, we want to keep the council tax at an affordable level for our residents, and that's got to be our aim. But we also want to continue delivering the services that we are delivering, and that comes at a cost. But sorry, I know that doesn't fully answer your question, but I think that's the best I can give you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, Matthew. I think we did expect the Cabinet Member for Finance to be here as well, Councillor Shenton, and I think he should have been, because we've got questions of a political nature that we don't expect you to answer. And I had quite a few questions about HTL, because they're based on a political reasoning about the fact that they are now, it's more or less been withdrawn. HDL, there's nothing in the pipeline. So I want to ask you a question about HDL, because it's a financial question. If it is stopped now, because it looks as if there's no other anything in the pipeline, what is the financial losses you think they have incurred up to now? Do we know what the financial losses that HDL have incurred?
I'm going to have to declare an interest. I'm a director on the company, as you know. and I don't think it's appropriate to be discussing the finances of the company in an open meeting. I think that is a part 2 discussion. I'll be happy to take that offline with you.
I've just got one question about the fair funding review, which we know is about to happen. It's more or less guaranteed, isn't it, that Hertsmere, being in the southeast where we are, will suffer compared to other authorities? Isn't it that it will affect us directly compared to the northern?
Yeah, I think I've put in the strategy what I feel is going to be our position in terms of the MTFP through fair funding. I've factored in a 0 grant increase going forward over the next few years. There has been some commentary in recent weeks actually that whilst some authorities were forecast to lose significant amounts under fair funding, the Chancellor has said that no authority will lose out on their funding. So actually the 0 increase that I've put in as our worst case scenario, hopefully that will come through. However, with moving grants in and out of core funding, I think it won't be completely transparent how funding for authorities is, but yeah, I don't think we're going to gain out of this. I think the best case for us, I think, is that we stay flat.
That would be the best case. Any further questions? So thank you very much, Matthew, for attending and presenting the strategy. I think we've made our comments and the rest is to note. We will also note the timetable before us. So thank you very much indeed. Right, members, we're nearly there. We are now on agenda item 7, which is the second task and finish group report, which hopefully will be ready to go before council. So we're going to review the report of the task and finish group and then hopefully refer it to cabinet. I'd like to hand over to the lead member, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the Task and Finish Group on Houses in Multiple Occupation was established following significant concern from residents in Potterspar about the accelerating growth of HMOs and its impact on safety, housing standards and the wider community. It is important to highlight the number of supporting appendices to this report, which include the amenity standards draft updates, licensing examples, mapping of existing HMOs and visuals of the current website to highlight its look and feel. These will help readers have a clear understanding of the issues described. After 3 formal meetings and consultation with officers and local stakeholders, the group has made 6 key recommendations. First, the group recommends that the council make an Article 4 direction for all 4 wards of Potterspar. This would remove the automatic right to convert single dwellings into HMOs without planning permission, allowing the council to better manage the scale and distribution of such properties. Second, the council should introduce additional licensing powers under the Housing Act 2004. This would extend licensing requirements to smaller HMOs, those housing 3 or 4 tenants, improving regulation, safety and oversight. Third, the council should adopt the updated HMO amenity standards policy, incorporating officers' proposals and the group's further recommendations. These include clear requirements for bathroom sizes, bin storage, regular landlord inspections, mains-powered smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, outside lighting and clear tenant information signage. Fourth, the HMO section of the council's website should be comprehensively redesigned to include practical information for tenants, landlords and local residents, with a clear system for logging and directing concerns to the appropriate team. Fifth, the group recommends the creation of a dedicated HMO officer post. This would enhance enforcement capacity, improve public communication and relieve existing pressure on the private sector housing team. Finally, a review of supplementary planning documents, the SPDs, should be undertaken in parallel with the local plan work that's been undertaken to establish clearer guidance on the concentration and location of HMOs within communities. In summary, these recommendations aim to balance the continued provision of affordable accommodation with the need to maintain community stability, improve standards and ensure effective local oversight. I'd like to thank officers, my fellow members of the Task and Finish Group, Councillors Clarkson and Cohen, and special thanks to Alex Moore for putting our thoughts and discussions into this report. Thank you.
Yes, a couple of comments before I open it to the floor. Once again, as being a member of the Task and Finish Group, I have to thank Alex Moore for his superb democratic service input. It's been a massive help. But I'd also like to thank Hilary Shade and the administration, because as you may know, Task and Finish Groups, what it does, we meant to put the report to Cabinet, but before that report goes to Cabinet, it has to go through management boards and the whole process, which would miss this one, and then it's accepted by Cabinet, and then they have 8 weeks to come back. Now, in light of the urgency of this report and the residents' interests, I asked via Hilary and Ian, or to Hilary and Ian, if we could bypass the first part, the management boards, etc., so it can go straight to this Cabinet. And they agreed in this case because of the urgency, and I think that is really important. I think you will read the recommendations, those 6 recommendations, will, I think, have a dramatic effect on HMOs and the licensing and the advanced licensing, which will hopefully help residents with their understanding, because we also have to realise that HMOs are a key part of the housing mix. We need HMOs. HMOs make many properties affordable, which to allow key workers and others who need it to live in our borough. So they are vital, but it's also vital that the public see that we manage them correctly and aware of the proliferation. And I think these recommendations under the leadership of Councillor Sullivan, this report, is a really detailed report. I'd now like to open it up to members. Councillor Butler, then Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yeah, no, I'm looking at the recommendations. I pretty much agree with all of them. The only thing I'm going to call a bit of a nuisance on 3.5, where it seems like councillors are being told off for not attending a meeting when some of these meetings were scheduled at times where councillors couldn't attend because of work commitments, family commitments, so forth. And I appreciate that I'm sat here tonight at another meeting. So I do take umbrage at this. It's the first time I've ever seen a council policy or operation scrutiny task and finish group where something like that is actually put in the actual document. So I take umbrage to that. I also point out that actually I was at the first meeting because I was on Zoom, and I can tell you now on the 28th of October at 1:14 I text Councillor Cohen, and he gave me a prayer hand on the text when I said I was online. I also commented through that meeting at 2:07, and I've got the texts to prove it, where I also got a thumbs up from Councillor Cohen, who actually responded to my message when I said we should actually do a FOI to Enfield Borough Council, because we were talking about their HMO issues as well. So I do want that to be amended, that actually I was in attendance at the first meeting because I was actually online. So I'm not going to have that one line down. And I also wanted noted that meetings such as this should be much more available for members and not just in the middle of a working day, because other people do have jobs to do. So I do take some umbrage to that. Other than that, the actual contents, the main point about this, I absolutely agree with. I am a bit concerned, however, after listening to tonight. Now, I don't know how far down the line you got with recommendation 5, but listening to Councillor Newmark earlier about employment and stuff like that, don't know how far you'll get down the line with that one, but I do wish you success in that, because I think you're absolutely right. I think we do need a dedicated officer. So I do recommend support all the recommendations that the Task and Finish Group have come up with, and I think it's a really good bit of work, and I wish you success.
So I'll just reply on behalf of Councillor Sullivan. I think, thank you very much. We're very sorry we missed you. Did attend the first one. At that first meeting we always ask at the start, when can members make it? And I understand that we're never going to be able to make it the whole time, but we have to make it clear who attends the meetings, well, and that's important. And we will certainly make sure this report is amended for certain and there's no slur intended. And I forgot, and I'm sorry about that. That recommendation about the HMO officer also came via the cabinet member. He said we are understaffed, and I think it helps cabinet to. I think they want to try and take on other officers. They just need sometimes scrutiny to come and make that recommendation. So we do hope that they do understand the need for that, because it's a really, really understaffed department. And it's only going to get busier. This workload of HMOs is going to get bigger. And thank you very much for the comments, and we will amend it. And please don't take it personally. Certainly not. Thank you. Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, just to commend Councillor Sullivan, indeed, it was a privilege to be on this task and finish group. And I think what's great about it, obviously it's covering Potter's Bar, and recommendation one is hyper-focused on sorting this issue out. But, you know, as a councillor for Boreham Wood, I get correspondence, I know the Member of Parliament has. There is a concern in Boreham Wood that, you know, this could be a problem here. And already there's a little bit of creep. There's been some examples. You know, in the task and finish group, we spoke to officers and specialists who said, well, actually, looking at the Boreham Wood thing and the various pressures, the housing pressures, we've then got the asylum hotel factors, we've got people moving out of London and all the rest of it. There are going to be issues in Boreham Wood, and I think particularly recommendation 2, these discretionary powers where we can impose additional licensing on HMOs. Yeah, we've got a problem in Potter's Bar. The good news with the work that Task and Finish has done, we could stop another problem in Boreham Wood. So I think it's just worth highlighting that and commending. This has been Potter's Bar specific, but it's going to be great in Boreham Wood as well.
Absolutely right. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Can I just correct a point of fact? We don't have any asylum hotels in Hertsmere.
I was never. I know that, but you have in Hertfordshire and in London.
Sorry,
Thank you for making the point. No, it's vital. We are all in key. We have to get the information correctly right. We have not got any asylum.
Yeah, no. Oh, see, Chair, I didn't actually. I meant the asylum hotel issue we have in the broader area. Right. Yeah.
Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Sussman, Councillor Green. I didn't expect to have so much talk on this.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a tremendous amount of work, not even just, you know, from officers who've had to do a lot of research. And I think we had a really high ask of, you know, going back and forth with different things. But we really wanted to make sure recommendations were kind of those big ticket items, and then things that were really achievable that doesn't seem to make a lot of difference on paper, like the way that we communicate with residents, because there is a lot of misinformation or disinformation or a lot of frustration. But actually, if we can give them a way to be able to get information about HMOs, see the register, understand what they can do. And even, you know, as we said in here, as a tenant or a landlord, that they understand their obligations, and that we're doing something that can have lasting effects. So I think, you know, especially that recommendation 4 with the website will make such a big difference to our communities.
Thank you. Just comments as opposed to questions, but I just think this is a really fantastic report that's come here, and I agree wholeheartedly with all the recommendations. I think that the whole rental sector is undergoing such change at the moment, and I just think that by having an Article 4 direction in place is such a deterrent to potentially bad landlords, because it just shows that we as an authority are taking this very, very seriously. And I just think we do need to roll this out across Hertsmere. Not all settlements sort of have as many HMOs, if any, but for those that do, we are sending out, if this all gets approved, a very clear message that we will not tolerate bad landlords, whether it be of a room in an HMO or otherwise. And I would like to thank everyone who is involved in the whole process, officers and councillors alike. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think this is also wonderful, and I thank everyone involved in it. I just want to make the point that not all HMOs are a bad thing. And they are, you know, when my daughter's at university, she lives in one. I mean, it's quite nice, in a nice area. And in my road, I have 2 HMOs, and they cause no problems at all. I also have a resident who lives next door to one that has so many problems that I cannot go into now. And it's actually not the fact that it's an HMO, it's the people, a few individuals who are living in it. And so I think it's a really good idea that we make it very clear to landlords whether or not you have 1 person or 20 people living in a house. If those people are behaving in a really dreadful way and making local residents' life an absolute misery, then we will not stand for it. So not all landlords are bad, not all HMOs are bad. I made the comment that, you know, an elephant is an animal and not all animals are elephants. So we shouldn't tar them all with the same brush, but we absolutely need to clamp down on people not respecting the fact that they are living next door to people who have as much right to peace and quiet as everyone else. So I think this is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great, and that's why I was quite clear in my introduction to make that point. The majority, by far, of HMOs are great here, and we have to remember that.
Yes.
It's the few, which is why we're recommending this additional licensing and checks, just to make sure
Thank
it's
you.
absolutely right, and we have to be very clear on that point. We have Councillor Allen. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know a great deal about this issue, so I won't make any technical comments. As it happens, there is an application for an HMO, to 3 doors from my house, which has set many tongues wagging. I won't be getting involved in that case, but I do sort of hear the other point that just because you live in an HMO, you do have the same rights as any other citizen, and we shouldn't, you know, we should be careful with our language and overall tone. But my question is different because, as I say, I don't know much about the technicalities of this particular issue, which is earlier we heard the portfolio holder knock back essentially many of our recommendations from the comms task and finish group. Of course, we await Cabinet's decision, but I think we can see which way the wind is blowing. What confidence do you have the Cabinet would accept these recommendations?
Well, we're in a democracy. Officers do guide them, and I think they have to be very, very aware of what the public are asking. That's all I can say. A lot of this is, we went to a public meeting, the public want reassurance. They want to know that we have control. A lot of this is set by national policy, but we do have powers locally, and we haven't been using any or brought into account. Lots of local authorities are doing what we've suggested. We've not rewritten any rule books. We've used best practice out there. So I think it would be, obviously I could say this myself, should be saying this, it'd be a very good idea for them to recommend them. I think it shows that we're taking regulation, licensing and checks very seriously. But it's their choice. I think Councillor Sullivan wants to come on this.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this has been an emerging issue over the last year, especially in Potter's but also I hope that the Cabinet would see through the recommendations it's about creating healthy, thriving homes for people in our borough, and not just about, you know, targeting HMOs or landlords. It's about how we can make sure that those homes are safe and put those safeguards in for people. So, you know, we want everyone to have a thriving home to live in our community. So I hope they can see the balance on what we've tried to achieve through the recommendations.
Just one quick line, a key point of our recommendations is actually to give tenants much more information of their rights to deal with certain landlords. And so actually a lot of it is to empower the tenants so they know where, and signpost them. So I think it's all positive. I think Councillor Clarkson wants to have the final word.
So it's something that Councillor Green said. I think it's really interesting that I think the recommendations here is predominantly using local powers to actually almost, the concept of an HMO is something that as a council and as individual councillors we should be applauding. And the danger is when you have something like Potter's Bar, that residents meeting Councillor Sullivan was at, and we saw, if handled incorrectly and not controlled, the public and residents will then have this bad impression of HMOs. You get a few dodgy ones, they then, right, you know, and that's normal. I think what this sets out, if the recommendations are adopted, is to avoid a repetition of Potter's Bar. We know there's bad HMOs, and we know that they then get a bad reputation for the thing. We want to defend the concept. We know it's a valuable part of our housing stock and how we can house people. And I do think these recommendations will go a long way to actually make them favourable amongst, you know, make the right HMOs happen in the right place.
Excellent point, Councillor Clarkson. This is to be positive about HMOs. This is all, it's not a negative report. It should be a very positive report. So can I just suggest a little change based on what Councillor Butler said, that we change the wording about the attendance at the meetings. Councillor Sullivan and HCO and me attended all 3 meetings, with Councillors Clarkson, Hanley and Butler attending meetings where possible. Great. So we will. That's the change we'll make. Thank you very much, Alex. So members, can we ask that you endorse the report and we agree to refer it to Cabinet next week? Unanimously agreed? Good, fantastic. Thank you very much. Can I just get, because I'm on low power mode, I just want to find out, because the next part is about the forward programme, which I have in my documents here. Right, so Agenda item 8 is forward planning programme, committee work programme and scrutiny. I've looked at the forward programme, the forward, and it only goes up to January. We've dealt with housing allocations policy, which is coming up in January. We've done the financial strategy, which is in December. And I think we've seen about the vision performance. Has that come to us at all? Or is that, there's nothing else on this, I think, that's in the forward.
That's just the quarterly.
That's just a quarterly report. So there's nothing on the forward plan that I think should concern us. I see hand raised.
Yeah, don't panic. It's just to say, well in advance, I will not be here on the 3rd of December. It's my birthday. As much as I'd love to celebrate with you lot, I'd rather be at home with my family. So apologies. So you've got good advantage notice. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so one thing, you've seen our work programme set for the next meeting on the 3rd of December. We've got Community Enforcement Service with Paul Sawyer and Ian Kershaw. Licensing and modern slavery, very important. And we've got the portfolio update from Communities, Neighbourhoods, Enforcement, Economic Zone Transformation, Councillor Chris Gray. The scrutiny reviews, so we've now got 2 to Cabinet. One's already been, one is coming to Cabinet. The housing one, how are we? We've had the first meeting. Where are we with that one? Councillor Sussman, please.
We have had 2 meetings. We're just planning the 3rd one now. Yeah, I think it's sort of going okay. Yeah,
So we've had, thank you. I want to ask how many meetings do you envisage? Because the idea of these task and finishes, you should be able to hopefully get it wrapped up maximum of 4. But
I think we're probably going to get to 4.
Right.
I think we will need 4, but we are definitely focused and on a good trajectory.
Beautiful. So will it be ready? Do you think it could be ready to come to our January meeting, the 20th? No, it can't be that one.
I think it needs to be the one after.
So 5th of March, we put that in.
Yeah.
So that's our year plan then already. I think we've got our year's work, another year over. So any comments from members apart from Councillor Butler who could work with me there? Good, so there's no other agenda item 9. We've got no AOB. Agenda item 10, as we said, we know the meetings. Just to put in your diaries now, the 26th of January, which is for everyone, all councillors, is the budget meeting where operations reviews and all councillors are invited. And the meeting is closed at 9:25. Thank you very much for attending, and I'll see you on the 3rd of December.